Regina,
Yes.
it is a pleasure.
Thank you.
Let's talk about your book, Adoption, The Unknown Blessing. Tell me about that title.
That title came to me really easy, and it was more or less of adoption. I didn't realize how blessed I was to be adopted. So I consider it the unknown blessing because at the time I got adopted to the time of my breakthrough, I didn't really realize the blessing of it. So that's where the title came from.
When we're talking about that time frame, it wasn't like a instant. You knew you were adopted at a very young age.
Yes, I did.
When did your adoptive parents, or the bonus parents, as I like to call them, tell you about your adoption?
They told me I was 6 years old, and I'll never forget the day because I was actually watching Soul Train. It was a Saturday at 12 o'clock. It was around noonish time. And they just kind of pulled me to the side and just told me I was adopted. They explained that they loved me and honestly, that's all I remember from it because I wanted to go back and watch Soul Train. So so I was good with the explanation and I felt fine at the time. I didn't have no problems with it. It was after the fact is when I started being more aware of my adoption.
Now, I was curious on why they picked that day, to tell you at 6 years old, I just want you to know you're adopted. Because did it ever cross your mind? I mean, and I'm sure you're 6 years old. They're your parents. They're who you believe you were with them since pretty much birth.
Exactly.
So you wouldn't have known there was anybody else.
No.
But they told you specifically, have they ever said why they wanted you to know then that you were
No,
adopted?
they actually never did. I don't know if it was like a situation that they just felt was the time. Maybe they just felt it was time. Maybe they felt that time frame was a good time to let me know. And that is kind of funny because you don't really know what's a good time. Some parents wait forever. Some parents never say. And then some parents tell you early. I guess it's just based on the parent.
And so they felt it was important for you to know
Exactly.
at that point. But how was your upbringing with them as your bonus parents? Did you ever feel like, oh my gosh, I am not part of this family? Because obviously there's always the physical. Do you look like one of your parents? Because everyone looks at that. They try to find, oh, you definitely have his eyes. Did you ever feel at any point that you were not part of the family?
No, because my family was amazing. The Smithwicks and the Nobles were and still are amazing family. They never brought it up. They never talked about it. I am the oldest adoptee in my family, but there are about 6 others after me. So it's very, common in my family of adoption. So it was never looked upon. They never brought it up. They never used it against you, nothing. So I never had no issues internally in my family. It was more externally that I had dealt with more situations about my adoption.
Now, for your parents to adopt, could they not have children? And did they want to have more kids?
Well, my mother had a surgery early in her 20s that she couldn't have any children. But my parents are from big families. My mother is one of 18 and my dad is one of 12. So they were like, one is enough. We just want to have a child of love and we're good. So they was not trying to have a big family. They was happy with just one child.
Did you ever want siblings?
I did. I always wanted an older brother. Always. But my mother, when I was around, I think I was around 12 or 13, she was a foster mother for about a year. Her name was Kimberly, and I enjoyed it. It was different, She just kind of, I guess, because I did ask, I wanted a sibling, so we did have the foster daughter for a while, foster sister, and then it worked out with her family. Then she ended up going back, whatever. So, but I did have that as a little experience. But being from a large family, I had the best of both worlds. I had all these cousins and stuff, but then when I want to be by myself, I go home, I'm by myself. So I was good. I ain't had no issues of the, people like only child syndrome. Like, I was great. So I ain't had no issues with it.
Yeah. I mean, you're very outgoing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if people meet you, they are your friends. You make a point of when you meet someone, they're not a stranger to you ever.
No.
That was the one thing I noticed about you when I met you.
Yes.
It was just like, hey, girl. And I'm like, oh, my. It's that you are so inviting. You know what I mean? And I would never think that you were an only child.
Everybody say that.
That you grew up, thankfully, with all these cousins. But like you said, you could go home. But I would just be like, wow, she is just so like, oh, hey, are you know, you're going to be my friend. Okay, you remember I'm going to talk to you tomorrow. What?
Like, what's your name?
Right. So that's what I noticed about you.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the upbringing. Like you mentioned, your family that you knew as your core. But when did it ever become a point where that core for you wasn't enough? Because you mentioned in your book that you kind of felt like in the universe that you didn't have a place. And that just seems odd to me, as well as you're so acclimated to meeting people. How did that happen?
Well, I felt that I had a place, I was good, but I felt that it was a void because I just didn't know where I literally came from. And I think more with the DNAs and the testing as we got older made it more, I guess, easier for me to find out where I came from. And then I kind of was like, well, I don't have well, let me go back. My father, who was my adoptive father, we look similar. So a lot of my friends and family, not family, but a lot of my friends didn't really think that I was adopted because they were like, "Oh, you look like your dad." And I said, "Well, you know what they say? You feed them long enough, they start looking like you." So, so I figured like, okay, well, I never say, but I was still lying because there are some people who did say, "Where who you look like?" And I was like, "Oh, I look like my grandmother's family, or I look like this person," because I'm 5'10", my parents are 5'8" and 5'2".
Wow.
So they were like, "Where you come from?" And I continually lied. And that's what it is. I lied.
Do you think that's what really triggered it? Because you were basically passing on this lie that you felt like maybe in some way your life was a lie. Because if someone is asking you these questions, you automatically revert to, "Oh, well, I just look like them," knowing that you were adopted that whole time.
Right.
Did the word adoption, ever have a negative connotation? Because when you say it's an unknown blessing, I look at that as well when you mentioned that, the unknown blessing. Did it ever have a negative connotation?
It did. It did. And it wasn't because of me. It was because of other people. When I was a kid, I used to hear, "You must be adopted. You're different. You must be adopted." You know how they always talk about either the redhead stepchild or the you're different because you're just not like this person or that person. And people use difference as bad. They don't see difference as being just different. And that just goes across the scale for racism or sexuality. Anything that people is not in the norm, they consider it being bad because they don't know about it. And a lot of people are intimidated by what they don't know. So adoption to me was when I was younger, I used to hear those little kids talk about, "You must be adopted." And when I started hearing that as I was a kid, it snowballed. So by the time I got older, people would say things about adoption and I just kept my mouth shut. Because I just like, look, what you're not going to do is you're not going to use that against me and you're not going to use that against my parents. Because we're not going to get punished because of your, ignorance and not knowing what's going on or what adoption really means. So I chose to not say anything. Not saying that was the best decision, but I chose that on a child decision. So I took a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old decision and continued it in my grown life. You see what I'm saying? So I never looked at it that way until I started going through my breakdown, but I realized that I made a decision as a child and kept it all my life.
You mentioned this breakdown, and anyone who knows you would never see any point of your life as a breakdown. You've always been very motivational. You continue to be. But when that moment happens, and you may want to talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
How that breakdown caused you to go back because looking for your adoptive parents, your birth parents did not happen at that very moment, but it kind of re-triggered the reason why you wanted to go back.
Right. So when I had my moment, 2 years ago, I had to know it had to be a reason. It wasn't surface. It wasn't the situation I was going through. It was something that triggered that. And I realized that I had to find out what was the core of this problem because I was tired of being sick and tired. I was tired of doing the same thing over and over again and making the same mistakes and doing the same things and not elevating and not living to my full potential. I felt that I was staggered and I was just like shooting myself in the foot. And I know I was full of greatness, but I just couldn't get there. It's like when you get that lid that is closed and then finally the lid is open and you keep hitting the same part and not looking up to seeing that the lid is open. That's where I was doing. And I was like, I'm tired of this. I can't keep doing this. I know I'm better than this. So when I decided to get the help to learn about why, I dig deep enough and realize, hey, your adoption started your lie. That's where you started your lie, and you tagged on with it. And then you started doing things. So when you start lying about who you are, you're not loving yourself. You don't love yourself because you don't think yourself is special, because you feel that something's wrong with you because you're different. Snowballed. Then now I need to get validation from people now, because I got to feel better about myself. You got to validate me. You got to tell me I'm beautiful. You got to tell me I'm nice. You got to tell me this. You got to tell me that. That rolls into my man life. Now I got issues because now I don't love myself, but I want you to love me more than I love me. And then you got to keep telling me how great I am, because I don't know how great I am. So now I got men issues. Now I have abandonment issues. Now I got, friendship issues. Now I see, duh, it came from one lie, and it turned into this whole lifestyle of me not being comfortable in my own skin and worrying about what other people think about me and why other people, do you like me? I'm trying to please everybody. I want you to like me. I never want nobody mad at me. I want everybody to be good with me. And that was I was known for. Everybody, oh, Regina, you always was the one that everybody was like, you're just the one everybody loved. Nobody, when somebody don't like me, I'm like, you don't like me?
Yeah.
Why you don't like me?
I'm like, why?
Everybody likes me.
Right. What is there not to love about Regina? That's the whole point.
Well, I mean,
yes.
Everybody's not everybody's cup of tea, regardless how great you think you are. That's why this world is the way it is. We got a bunch of people. Everybody's not gonna like everybody. But that's when you're rooted in who you are. You don't care about that. You just continue to do what you do and just love the people that love you. And I had to get there. It took me 50 years, but I had to finally get to the point that I was happy with myself. And then that made me feel whole. So
it took 50 years to get to the point where you feel comfortable in your own skin at this point, which is a part of this journey, because you do go through that breakdown. And then you had the breakthrough, because this journey for you started many years when you originally started to look for your mother and your father. There was a point where it was going to cost a lot of money, and it was like the early 2000s. You stopped there. Why did you stop looking? I know money is always one, but you were saving up for it to pay someone to find your family.
I was saving up for it, but my little two blessings, my twin boys came. I was, when I was pregnant. Of course, at that time, not just one, but two, your priority shifts a little bit. So he's like, okay, I'm going to have to hold this off for a little while. But guess what? I thought about it. It's not holding off. God gives you God winks in little nuggets. He just wanted you to get that. I knew her name. I got the information I needed. I felt a little better because I could connect with that, So I feel that God was preparing me for this day, because I wasn't ready. My mind wasn't ready. A lot of people was like, oh, why you didn't do it earlier? Because my mind wasn't the same as I am right now. I had to be where I'm at now, because I would have been so surfaced at the time. It wouldn't so thin. I wouldn't translate the same way I'm doing right now. So I trust His purpose. I trust His process, and I'm glad it happened, but I'm glad it happened when it's supposed to happen, not when I wanted it to happen.
It was God's timing, as you mentioned that, because it was, 13, 14 years?
Yeah.
Because you were looking at turning 50. It's no secret. You talk about how old you are.
Oh, yeah. I'm 51 now.
You're 51 now, yeah. And fabulous. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I know that was a big milestone, turning 50. You were able to pick back up, thankfully, because there were new technologies out there, new advances, and actually finding family members that actually aided you, so it didn't cost what was going to cost you back in early 2000. That allowed for you to find that family member that kind of connected the dots for you. How long did it take from that initial point? And you talk about in the book, and I think it's amazing to read that process, because it is so deep. How long did it take from the moment that you had that one connection, that one name, until you knew all the pieces in the puzzle of your birth parents?
One day. One day. And I'll give you a day and a half, because I was able to contact another family member till the morning, because they had to work late. They worked third shift. So I didn't get in contact with them until the next morning. So I'll give you the half. But it took me one day to find out who they both were.
All those years.
And found it in one day.
In one day. You had all the
God's
pieces.
way. That was God's purpose. That's what He wanted. See how easy it was when you wait? I didn't have to spend no money. I didn't have to do all that. And I was in the right mind to take it in.
When you found that family member and actually put the pieces together for both sides, how many siblings did you realize you had?
I went from 0 to 6.
Like a car, like from 0 to 6.
0 to 6. It was really amazing because I grew up around, like I said, my mother and father have tons of brothers and sisters. I have friends that have brothers and sisters. I have god sisters, but for me to actually have a blood sister, to somebody that I shared a parent with, someone that I look like, someone that I have mannerisms like, it's just amazing to me to know I have other people out there that we share the same thing. You know, people who have children, siblings, you're born into it, you don't see it the same way, you take it for granted, and sometimes you don't want to be bothered with them, you don't care, oh God, it's my sister, she get on my nerves, but I cherish it because I'm 50 years old and I just got 6 sisters out of this. 6 siblings, excuse me. I have 4 sisters and 2 brothers.
Oh. Did you get an older brother out of this?
Yes! Anthony, yes, my older brother. And we're so much alike. Our minds, we think, and we look alike. It's just so funny. Like, we talk like, oh my gosh, we sound like each other. So I'm glad I finally got my older brother. And actually, today's his birthday.
Oh, so, look at that.
Yes,
you know what?
Yes.
It transcends just upbringing. To know that you see someone who not only looks like you have the same mannerisms, you notice the exact types, like you were talking, hands, how tall, all those things.
I found my height.
You found where your height came from.
I found my height.
Because you were quite tall.
Taller than everybody else. Yeah. I found it.
So, in finding that, did you find you? And if so, who are you?
Yes. In this process, not just finding me, but I'm comfortable with me. I love me. I'm a child of God. You know what I'm saying? I am amazing. I'm wonderful. Like I always say, my new acronym is Regina. I am royal. I'm educated. I'm gorgeous. I'm independent. I'm nice, and I'm amazing. And I'm not ashamed of it. I had to come to this point to realize that I am a queen. My mother named me Regina. That means actually queen. And I'm going to take my little crown and I'm going to live my queen life because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. God put me here for a purpose and reason, and all the endeavors I'm in right now is all manifesting. It's all happening because I allow him to come in my life, and I told him I was tired. I told God I was tired. I was sick and tired. I said, Lord, please come in my life and just do what you got to do with me, and I'm your vessel, and I'm going to do right by you. I promise you that, and this is what happened. Me sitting here with you. So I always tell people, try God. If you haven't tried him, please do, because he is there and he just wants the best for you. And you got to go through stuff. It's okay, because it's not a failure. You are just going through experiences. That's all it is. Life experiences. And when you go through it, he's going to take you through the process, and you're going to see on the other end of that rainbow, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I get it now. It all clicked.
It all clicked for you. Well, I want people to read the book and get an opportunity to see in depth of how this all came together, how God used this experience of being adopted, as you say, the adoption, the unknown blessing for you, has come to fruition to who you are today.
Yes.
And I'm just so glad we could sit down and talk about it. But absolutely, people need to read this book and get the fullness of how miraculous this entire experience has been for you. And seeing you now, I can say, yes, amazing before Regina not knowing who her birth parents are to knowing her whole new family and the Regina you sit here to be today. We just can't wait to see and hear more about your journey and how it's going to continue with this book, Adoption, the Unknown Blessing. Thank you, Regina.
Thank you. Thank you so much.